The tragedy in the Gulf has once again sparked a debate over energy policy. This week, a group of high-powered business executives said that not enough is being spent on basic research to develop alternative sources of energy. In a newly released report, Bill Gates and the American Energy Innovation Council are calling for more than a tripling of government spending on research and development to $16 billion a year and a new independent board to oversee national energy strategy. Earlier, I spoke with Microsoft co-founder and chairman Bill Gates. Mr. Gates, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Obviously, the oil spill in the Gulf makes your proposal for $11 billion in energy innovation all the more resonant, all the more relevant. But I'm wondering, some are criticizing the president's handling of the federal response to the spill by saying he doesn't have executive experience, and that's why he hasn't been able to really get the federal bureaucracy moving the way it needs to. As a former CEO, do you think there's anything to that at all?
Well, I think any crisis like this, the key thing is to avoid them happening in the future. You know, I'm not an expert on oil recovery. BP is certainly incented to try and minimize the damage here in a very complex situation. But how do we get an energy infrastructure that is this fragile? You know, we've got a supply chain where we send $1 billion a year overseas, and you can imagine that there will be disruptions. When there have been in the past, we've always said, no, let's put a solution in place. But in fact, the only real solution is to take American ingenuity and fund R&D to get energy in different forms, that we're not sending as much money away and that it's stable and reliable.
Well, let's talk about that. Obviously, your proposal for $11 billion in additional spending for energy innovation. There's not a huge appetite right now among the American people for more spending with the record deficits we have. Forgetting the merits of your proposal for a second, how politically feasible is it?
Well, I would distinguish between spending and investment. What we're talking about is about 1% of what the United States spends on energy being devoted to R&D. And so if you find a way out of the energy sector to raise that 1%, which is not some huge increase in the cost there, then you can tap into the unique ability in this country through its universities, national labs, entrepreneurs, to give us a form of energy that is both cheaper, not dependent on foreign supply, and is environmentally designed so that we're not emitting carbon and getting into the climate change problem. The only way you get those things is through the breakthroughs, and I'm optimistic they're there, but we're not making the investment. Today we spend only about $4 billion on energy R&D compared to $30 billion on health, $80 billion on defense.
So that's your pitch. How receptive have you found lawmakers?
Well, there's obviously a tight budget, and it'd be tough to say that this money should come from existing categories. The question is, can the energy sector finance its own revolution and create these great R&D jobs here in America?
What's the risk if President Obama and Congress and the American people don't do this?
The problem we'll run into is that we'll have more crises, like the oil spill, and we'll have a supply disruption. We'll start to see more and more effects of the climate problem. The costs will go up because you're looking for oil in harder and harder places. So you'll just be paying more and more. And so it's an implicit tax. If you don't innovate, it's this gigantic cost that we'll be paying.
You know, some experts believe that the only way to spur the kind of innovation and investment in these alternative forms of energy is to dissuade the American people and American enterprise from using oil and gasoline. Do you think that a gas tax is necessary?
That's not specifically necessary. You need some source of funding for this R&D, and so you would take some parts of the energy sector and raise the money there. If you want people to switch, there's two ways to do it. One is to invent something that's lower cost. The other is to raise the cost of the thing that's forcing us to fund the military or creating climate problems and help the new technology. The bulk of what's missing right now that will force us at some point to go for a very expensive alternative because we haven't done an invention is this this R&D piece isn't getting done.
Why do you think that the innovation and technology that's part of the oil industry hasn't advanced enough in the last 30 years? I mean, to plug this hole in the Gulf, they're using basically the same technology as they used 20, 30 years ago. Why hasn't that advanced?
Well, certainly in retrospect, they needed to invest more in these deep sea operations. Deep sea operation is fairly complicated in terms of the pressures and temperatures, how materials behave down there. And obviously, now they're seeing the cost of not doing that. That'll be reinforced in a lot of ways. So that particular innovation will happen, but you're going to get oil in very hard places. With other energy sources over time, you wouldn't have to try that hard. You wouldn't have to be bringing most of it out of the Middle East, where the chance of something disrupting that in the years ahead is very measurable, and we're not setting ourselves up to get rid of that over time.
So tell us what areas you're looking at.
Well, the idea of the Council's report is that you fund R&D very broadly with an open mind. You don't just pick and say it'll be synthetic fuels or hydrogen or fuel cells, but you get behind all of those things and you create metrics. In the solar area alone, there's so many different approaches: solar thermal, solar chemical, solar electric, and many different scientists. And that's the beauty of America, is you can have hundreds of teams pursuing those things. And as they meet milestones, they can get more funding.
The economic recovery has been slow and relatively jobless. What do you think President Obama needs to do?
Well, the president can't just pull the levers and make the economy take off. The right emergency steps were taken, and
so you support the stimulus and the TARP program.
Well, I don't think I need to get into the particulars, and it's easy looking back to say, okay, you could have tuned this or that. The incredible measures needed to be taken to make sure there wasn't a collapse, both in terms of stabilizing the financial system and then priming the pump of the economy, because it had been slowed down so much. And now we're seeing the benefits that those things have been done. Now this is an international problem, and so everybody's debt is coming in. Are those governments overspending? Our own government's looking at, when do you cut back? And it's a tricky thing, because almost everybody agrees we need to keep spending up, not take all country deficits to zero right away, but over time you have to move in that direction. And so getting the timing right on this is a very tough challenge.
So do you think that there needs to be another stimulus to keep spending up?
In terms of the U.S. in particular, lots of people have views, plus and minus on that, in terms of, if you did a smaller stimulus, where exactly would you target? Our $16 billion for energy R&D, that's a type of stimulus. That is creating jobs, and it's a nice investment in the future. So where you get a twofer like that, that feels particularly attractive, that you can do that.
Do you think the health care legislation is going to do enough to contain costs and control the deficit?
Well, the health care bill broadened coverage, and there's a lot of...
yeah, but beyond that, do you think it's going to contain...
In terms of cost containment, that step alone, in my view, is at most the start of how we look at not letting medical costs continue to go up. The projection is they'll continue to go up, and it creates a dilemma that if the government's funding those costs, and if you feel your taxation levels are going to hit some limit, then what are you taking money away from? You're not going to take it away from Social Security. You're not going to take it away from paying the debt, and it's a tough problem. So if we could innovate to reduce those increases in costs, that would be great. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there. People, in some respects, may be tired of hearing about healthcare, but in terms of really reducing the cost, no, the years ahead, that's going to, a lot of experts and politicians are going to have to think about how that's achieved.
Last month, Apple passed Microsoft in market capitalization, it marked a historic moment where Microsoft lost its status as the largest tech company in the world. Why did this happen, and do you still have confidence in CEO Steve Ballmer?
Oh, Microsoft's doing a lot of great stuff, and the software industry, the opportunities are pretty phenomenal. The way that people think about TV, the way they think about reading, about learning, software is going to revolutionize that. Our companies, are stock has gone up, it's gone down. We've been the most valuable, not the most valuable. That changed, and it will change again and again and again. There's room for more than one company to succeed in the industry. I happen to like the things that Steve's doing. It's not my full-time work, but as a board member, I see a lot of great things going on.
Bill Gates, thanks so much for joining us.